So I'm Rosa Joyce. I go to La Follette High School and I'm in 11th grade. So what I'm doing right now is I'm working on a piece that focuses on the struggles of Guatemalan coffee farmers to sell their coffee in the United States and abroad. And so what I'm doing right now is kind of advocacy writing and writing that'll raise awareness. So first I'm informing people of the struggles that the Guatemalan farmers go through in order to sell their coffee in other places. And then I'm also trying to present an alternative for the system through my own project that is trying to sell an individual coffee farmer's coffee. And so I'm informing other people who I hope might consider purchasing some of the coffee for this farmer. I've already written the whole draft once, just a rough draft, and then I went through it and I highlighted things that I thought might need to be changed. So it says, it all starts with a seed planted in the fertile soil in a secluded village in the Guatemalan highlands. A poor campesino gets up at dawn to plant his savings in coffee beans as the summer rain loosens the porous soil. So there are two things that stuck out to me in that section. The first is campesino, but a lot of people who are just reading this in their spare time might not know what that means. So that's kind of like a Spanish word for kind of like a peasant farmer. So I'm just going to say a poor farmer instead. So I'm going to type the word farmer. And then also in that sentence, what stuck out to me was the word porous soil. And I have background with like soil quality, and I've done other projects, but someone who is just reading this for the first time might not know what that means. So I'm going to delete that section because that's too detailed for my audience. So I'm just going to, instead of porous, I'm just going to leave it with the word soil. So the new sentence reads, a poor farmer gets up at dawn to plant his savings in coffee beans as the summer rain loosens the soil. And next I'm just kind of scanning my paragraph for any other possible errors I want to correct. And I notice I've put in a place where I think I could break one large section of text into two paragraphs. So the first section kind of details the process of growing coffee from the farmer's perspective, but then I start talking about suddenly how he's trying to grow and sell his coffee in other places. I'm going to read a sentence to give you some context before that. I said, although it took approximately 1,825 days just to reach that point, it is only the first step in the process of making any earnings on that hard work. And so that was referring to the coffee growing process and the 5-year process that it takes to simply have a coffee tree to produce beans. I'm going to divide that right there, and now that's the end of the paragraph. And then the new paragraph is starting to talk about the process of trying to sell your coffee in the United States. So it says, the first roadblock comes from market saturation. Market saturation might be too much of a technical term for my audience, and my audience being people who I hope will donate a few dollars to this farmer in exchange for getting some of his coffee. Instead of market saturation, I'm going to kind of explain what that is in layman's terms. So maybe too many coffee growers in one place. Farther in my paragraph, I have a new sentence that says, next you have to harvest the coffee beans, clean the dirt off, free the beans from twigs, put it in a burlap sack, and find someone who owns a truck that can haul the coffee to be sold. And when referring to the beans, I used the word it. It should be plural, so I'm going to change it to the word them. And then I think I'm going to choose a few sentences from each paragraph. Since this is a very long piece of writing, I want my audience to have like a few lines of text that are really the main ideas so that I can shorten the whole piece into something more concise and eliminate some of the redundant sentences. So I go to the end of my paragraph and I see kind of a key sentence, so I'm going to put a star by it. The farmer and his family might do slightly better than break even on their investment, but it doesn't give them any viable social mobility or financial stability. So that's kind of the core of what I'm getting at here, that these people are working so hard and going through this really intense process, and yet they don't have the means to live with any sort of reward for all their hard work. Here's a new paragraph that highlights the transition from explaining the perspective of the small grower to then explaining the process of how to sell one's coffee, and then back to what the purpose of my writing is, or the perspective that this individual coffee grower that I know, how he factors in to this process. So it starts with the sentence, 3 months ago, as a favor to my dad's friend Luis, we brought 22 pounds of green coffee beans, and in parentheses, 17 pounds of roasted coffee beans, from a small Guatemalan village called Los Planes in our carry-on suitcase. To start the process, it is necessary to find someone to roast the coffee and have already established connections with fair trade coffee taste testers. So I think I highlighted the word already because I feel like it doesn't quite sound right, and it might be replaced with a more specific word. So I'm going to use the word prior. And next I have a break in my paragraph where I describe the stakes that are at hand for this farmer in his meeting. So the sentence reads, the entire fate of the farmer's yield lies in each meeting. Perhaps the coffee appraiser decides that he didn't like the coffee after a few years' worth of tasting. Another grower might be selling it for a cent less or have a year's worth more of experience. The small farmer faces so many roadblocks even though he had almost ideal circumstances up to that point. And then the next sentence, I've highlighted a large chunk that says, and the sentence continues in kind of a humorous attempt to underlie the irony of such intense circumstances happening in such a casual setting. So the rest of the sentence reads, or the full sentence reads, in the system, the poor coffee grower loses time, money, and beans only to send his crop thousands of miles away to be sipped and thereby rejected by a man in a crowded cafe next to a sleep-deprived college student and a pink-haired woman reading the classifieds. So this might not make the final cut in terms of being concise for our key sentences paragraph, but this sentence is trying to show that this farmer is relying on a set of circumstances that would otherwise be dismissed as just a casual encounter in a setting that does not have anything riding on it, but indeed, under the surface, this farmer is depending on what this coffee taste tester thinks.